Probity is an interesting word. It's defined as integrity, uprightness and honesty. Those three words are always used when anyone is seeking to define probity. Probity is used in a range of areas, particularly when people need to act fairly and ethically, and those are words that are also used a lot, not necessarily in the definition, but just when talking about probity, so something being ethical and fair and so on. It's important. Probity is important in all aspects of business, so it's important, for example, with insider dealing and things like that, and the share markets, and that's where it has some history there. It also has a great long history in government and government decision making, which is obviously the context that I come to it. What probity means in relation to government decisions, and particularly government procurement, is ensuring that a government body, either itself or a party on behalf of the government body, is open and fair at all times. It presents open and fair opportunities to the market without fear or favour. So without fear of a particular entity winning or losing, or without favouring any particular entity as well. There's a lot of what they call tenets of probity. In New South Wales, I say a lot, there's 5 or 6 that the ICAC talk about. They talk about value for money as being an overarching principle of probity. So when they talk about their sort of probity checklist, what you have to sort of tick off to ensure that you're achieving probity from a New South Wales government perspective, you need to make sure that what you're doing achieves value for money. It is an appropriate spend of taxpayers' money, because that's what's happening, and that's why it's important that these checks and balances are in place. Because it's so very easy to spend other people's money. People come to purchasing decisions with a different mindset sometimes when they're spending their own money. So they walk into a shop, for example, and choose a television based on a certain set of criteria, and one of them will always be price, and it should be price. And the same sort of philosophy needs to be undertaken when buying on behalf of government as well. You can't just go for the best, most expensive bidder, for example, nor should you go for the cheapest the cheapest proposal either. Value for money is a balance. It's a balance between price, capability, long-term life cycle costs, technical excellence, reliability, a team that's being put forward, and so on. It's a mix of all of those criteria, and those criteria should be reflected in the tender conditions. Those are the things that you should be assessing the tender against: price and everything else. So value for money is the first tenet of probity. There's also impartiality, which means that people need to be completely impartial in their decision making. So they mustn't come to the table with any preconceptions about a particular tenderer, either negative or positive. They must be totally impartial. Associated with that is dealing with conflicts of interest appropriately. And conflicts of interest obviously happen, and they can be real, they can be perceived, and they're both sort of as bad as each other, if you like. A real conflict of interest is an example of that is where somebody owns shares in a body that is up for a decision. So, and the awarding of a contract to that body will have a positive impact on the share price. There is a clear financial conflict of interest in that situation. Other clear conflicts of interest are where a spouse or a close family member work in an organisation, and then that organisation winning this contract or tender would have a positive impact on that close family member's job, salary, bonus, whatever it might be. So again, clear, no, family, conflict of interest, and also possibly financial, depending on how far it goes. Perceived conflicts of interest are probably the harder ones to deal with. They are where you have friendships, for example, or where you have very long-term business relationships which verge on friendships, or which translate into more than just an everyday, day-to-day business relationship. And they need to be managed. And one way of managing them is to disclose them or to publish them, and that publication just means filling out a conflict of interest register. So conflicts of interest present problems, and they need to be dealt with one way or another. They need to be identified firstly, and so you need to understand what you're looking for, and then they need to be managed and dealt with. So the next ICAC principle is confidentiality. And that's obviously important. So the confidentiality of the bidder's information in relation to a tender process needs to be absolutely respected. But that needs to be balanced against the other ICAC principle, the fifth one, which is transparency and openness and disclosure. So when you're going through your tender process, you need to be able to stand behind whatever decision is made And to do that, you need to be able to open that decision up to scrutiny. So you need to keep proper records all the way through, and you need to say this person or this entity won this contract, this was the price, these were the reasons. Has anybody got a problem with that? And you need to be able to be proud of what you've done and do it in such a way that you can comfortably say all of those things. I say to clients who retreat when they are faced with questions from losing tenderers, I say you shouldn't retreat, you should be proud of the process you've run. This tenderer is asking for the tender evaluation methodology. They want to know how we went about the decision-making process. There's nothing in that that's necessarily controversial or confidential. Let's give it to them. If we don't, they'll only get it under a freedom of information application anyway. So why don't we go on the front foot, not alienate them? As soon as you pull the shutters down and make people go to the Ombudsman, Freedom of Information officers, or to the court to obtain information, then you are immediately putting people on the back foot. People get defensive and they think something's happened where it hasn't. So they're the 5 ICAC principles. There is a 6th one which ICAC has added on recently, which is managing contractor performance. And that's an interesting sort of closing the loop on the procurement process in a way. And it's sort of an acknowledgement to say, well, we went to the market on this basis. We went with a public tender, we received these tenders, these were our criteria, this was our price, and this is what we selected as the right contractor for what it is that we were procuring. And you can sort of draw a line under that and say, okay, on to the next procurement, or you can carry that forward and, as I say, close the loop and say, did we achieve what we set out to do? What we set out to do was to obtain the best value for money service provider or good or piece of equipment or whatever available in the market at the time. And the only way to really address that and to query that is to see how the contract itself is being performed and what you got out of it. So the ongoing contractor performance is an evolution, I think, and I think it's a good one.